Welcome to the Cozyy Joe Show Thread Therapy, first installment. Yay! By request, someone had questions about knitting needles. They wanted to start knitting and wanted my advice for the best knitting needles. I have knit and crocheted for 35 years, so I have quite the collection. So your typical, when you think about knitting needles, you think about these long, crazy, these are 14-inch knitting needles. These are what I started with. These are made by the brand Boye, B-O-Y-E, and they are aluminum 14-inch knitting needles. So there's that option. This brand is Susan Bates. I don't even know if this is still a thing. If you can find Susan Bates knitting needles, that is the Cadillac of knitting needles. And I'll tell you why. Okay. See how shiny that one is? That's aluminum. So it's really, really slick and easy to drop stitches off the end of those. Susan Bates knitting needles are powder coated. Oh, they are great. And it's the yarn just clings to it. I love Susan Bates. I don't know, you might can find them, I don't even know if it's a brand, you might can find them on eBay or something like that. This is my particular favorite. These are 8-inch bamboo knitting needles. Love these. Wooden needles, especially this bamboo, it's very rare that you get slip stitches from a wooden needle. These are awesome. I love these short needles. You can put a lot more yarn on there than you realize. They're great. Just a comparison here. I don't have a wide enough angle on my camera here. There you go. So you can see how much more cumbersome this is going to be. This can get really heavy with these 14-inch needles. These are just so much more manageable, easy to maneuver. I went on eBay and spent maybe $12 purchasing bamboo knitting needles and crochet hooks. It was the best investment I've ever made in this craft. So I keep all of my 8-inch straight knitting needles in here, and there's all kinds of sizes. Let me just show you. I will do a video in the future about different types of yarn. That is going to make all the difference in the world. Explaining things. Alright, so roughly I have these spread out in order of thickness of needles. So you can see right there, those are tiny, tiny. I don't even know what size that is. There's a little, yeah, there it is. 2.5 millimeter. That is going to be probably for making socks or something like that. Sock yarn is very thin, or knitted lace, which is something I've never cared to do. These sizes right here, that is going to be for your typical yarn, a worsted weight yarn. That's what you would call normal yarn, more or less. Sport weight yarn, things like that. This size is for chunky yarn or knitting with more than one strand of yarn at a time. So you can see how big those are. Small to big, see? The next type of knitting needle is a circular knitting needle. I love working on circulars. The purpose of a circular needle is to make a tube, a seamless tube. Not for socks. They are for, well, this size here, this is a 16-inch circular knitting needle. They're for making hats. I love making hats on these circular needles. It can be one tube, and you don't even have to sew anything together. I'm the world's worst at sewing yarn together. And these are also sized just like the straight needles. You have the teeny tiny ones here up to the larger, so you can see the difference there side by side. These are teeny tiny right here. 16-inch circular knitting needles. Here's some more circular needles. These are 32-inch needles. Let me see if I can get it out there. So these are very, very long. These are for making blankets, or for whatever reason, if you needed to make a big tube, that's what it would be. See, it's all coiled around in there. It's 32-inch, and they're sized just like the other. Circular needles are usually for more advanced techniques, but if you want to start out learning on them, you know, go for it. I love them, and as with the others, I recommend a wooden set, 32-inch. This is advanced knitting techniques. This is a 5-needle set, double pointed needle set. These are for making socks, because socks are such a small tube. You're not going to have circular needles that can hold that few amount of stitches. And these are sized just like any of the others. Let's see. So you have the teeny tiny ones here all the way up to the large ones. So size comparison side by side right there. So let me kind of show you the idea behind this. I'm gonna get these out that's already. Never, ever, never use aluminum double point knitting needles. You will hate yourself. So instead of like making a circle with the circular needles, these more or less, depending on how many you're using, make a triangle. So you'd be working your stitches around in this area, and that can be as small an opening as you need. I personally like the 5 needle set instead of the 4 needle set, because it makes more of a square. Let me show you. Just gives you a little bit more room for maneuvering. So you'd be working in this, around this area here. You can make it as small as you need to, you know, depending on what size tube you're making. I know that probably don't make a hill of beans sense to you right now, but I'm just kind of giving you an overview of what's used for what. Accessories that you need for knitting and crochet. You need some scissors. I wanted some stork scissors forever, so I finally got some. Put them on a little string. This is very, very important little nifty device here. Let me see. See the numbers on there? So what these do, these slip onto your knitting needle. Let me get one small enough. You can get them different sizes. So you can literally slip this little device onto your knitting needle, and you can keep up with what row you're on. You can change these little numbers. And that's real important when you're working a pattern. Those are awesome. Or, there you go, old-fashioned. Notepad and pencil. This is a nifty little device. This is a gauge device where you can determine if for whatever reason you don't have an identification on your needle. You can put it right there and it'll tell you. So that just happens to be a size 7. The bane of all knitters, if you've been knitting for years, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they decided to go to the metric system. I absolutely hate it because I'm used to, oh, that's a size 11. Well, now it's 8mm. I don't know what an 8mm is, but you tell me size 11, I can figure that out all day long. So I think right here, yeah, I think they have the millimeters down there for you. See? And this works for crochet hooks and knitting needles. Knitting needles and crochet hooks correspond, so whatever is a 4.25mm crochet hook is going to be the same 4.25mm knitting needle. That way, in case you have to use a crochet hook for whatever with your work, they correspond. This little gizmo right here, so something very important when you're knitting, you have to know how many rows are in an inch and how many stitches are in an inch. And the reason that's important is because if you're working on a pattern for a sweater and it's going to be a particular size, you're going to want to know how many rows and stitches are per inch to know if you're going right along with that pattern's measurements. Otherwise, you're going to come out with a sweater 10 times too big if your gauge is wrong. Now, if you're making things like scarves, things like that, you don't have to worry about gauge too much. After you've done enough time, you don't even have to think about it. It's just natural. But it's a good learning tool. These little things are called point protectors. They look all kinds of different ways. Those look like little hats. And what they do is when you have all your stitches on your needle and you have to get up and answer the phone or whatever you have to do, looky there. Stick it right there and your stitches won't fall off. It's great. I think most of them are made out of that rubbery kind of stuff, but they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Let's see here. If you're very adventurous, which is something I've never done with knitting, these are yarn bobbins. And if you're going to be working in multiple variegated colors, you just wrap your different colors around this little bobbin and they just dangle off your work. And it keeps all of your thread from getting discombobulated. These little things, let's see if I can get it out. These are cable stitch holders. So if you've ever seen that pretty little twisted stitch in a sweater, those are called cables, and this is how you make them. You literally, let's see. So what you would do is slip stitches off of your needle onto this, and it kind of holds it there, and then you'll bring it back around. You like go around some stitches to get the twist, and that's what holds it so that you don't drop stitches. Let's see what else we have. That looks like it. Look at those tiny little things. So knitting is very cheap. It's very portable. It's fun. These are sock sets. Look at those. See, it's never even been opened. I'm too scared to try it. Something else that you want to have is a crochet hook. That comes in handy when you're finishing off your work and weaving in ends. One of the things that I hate the most about, if I have to hate anything, is weaving in ends, the tails when you finish your work. But the mark of a professional knitter is in those finishing details. This is the book that I learned how to knit and crochet with. It's probably not even in print anymore. I bought this in 1985. And you can see how dated it looks. But get a good how-to. There are so many free things you can get online now. KnittingpatternCentral.com, crochetpatternCentral.com. It's all free. But I'll have another video posted about that. So that's how you get started knitting.